In March 2019, when prison guards discovered the lifeless body of Luis Romero in his cell at the Corcoran Correctional Facility, they were confronted with a scene that shocked even the most seasoned members of the penitentiary system. The crime was so brutal and inhumane that its details were not immediately disclosed to the public. It later emerged that Romero's cellmate, Jaime Osuna, had not only taken his life but had also committed acts of barbaric cruelty that drew parallels with ancient ritualistic executions. This murder marked the culmination of a bloody path that had begun long before Osuna's incarceration. Jaime Osuna, whose face was adorned with bizarre tattoos, including an intricate mask etched into his skin, became a symbol of horror for the public. He was dubbed the man with 1,000 faces due to his sinister appearance and his ability to exploit the fears of those around him. Osuna made no attempt to conceal his violent nature. On the contrary, he flaunted it with pride, mocking the families of his victims and refusing to show any remorse. This narrative is not merely about a serial killer, it is a tale of how a person, confronted with violence in childhood, grows to become a monster capable of unimaginable acts of cruelty. It is a story of how the justice system failed to recognize and prevent the tragedies spawned by his behavior. Ultimately, it is a reflection on the very nature of evil, which continues to evoke fear, intrigue, and countless questions. Jaime Osuna was born in 1988 in Bakersfield, California, to a family that could hardly be described as stable. His mother, Michelle, was a young woman struggling to cope with poverty and personal issues. Jaime's father abandoned the family shortly after his birth, leaving the boy without a male role model to guide him on the right path. When Jaime turned 5, Michelle remarried. The new stepfather, Jeff, became a source of not only harsh discipline but also genuine violence for the boy. According to Osuna's own recollections, Jeff frequently resorted to corporal punishment that exceeded reasonable bounds. The boy was punished for the slightest infractions, and sometimes even without cause. He was tied to a tree in the yard, beaten with a belt, and humiliated. This fostered in the child a profound sense of fear and simultaneous hatred for the world around him. Jaime's school years were marked by academic struggles and behavioral issues. Teachers described him as a withdrawn and aggressive child who found it difficult to connect with his peers. Psychologists who worked with Osuna in his youth speculated that he might have suffered from mental disorders stemming from early trauma. However, the family did not seek professional help, choosing instead to ignore the warning signs of impending disaster. By the age of 12, Jaime's behavior began to change dramatically. He started to avoid home, often running to the streets, where he quickly found companionship among local gang members. In this environment, Osuna was first exposed to violence, which would later become an inseparable part of his life. He engaged in fights, drug dealing, and robberies, striving to assert himself among his peers. At 15, he was arrested for the first time for assault with a deadly weapon. This arrest did not serve as a lesson, rather, it intensified his desire to break the law. By this time, his relationship with his mother had deteriorated completely. Michelle blamed herself for failing to provide her son with love and support, yet felt powerless to change the situation. Osuna, in turn, began to perceive everyone around him as enemies. His tattoos, initially small inscriptions, later evolving into larger designs, became symbols of his rejection of society and its established norms. A pivotal moment in Osuna's life came when he transitioned from petty delinquency to genuine violence. In one incident, he brutally assaulted a man who dared to argue with him in a bar. This episode led to yet another arrest, but the judicial system once again imposed only a brief sentence. Upon his release, Osuna returned to the streets, now even more embittered. By the end of his teenage years, Jaime had become a loner, feared even by members of street gangs. His behavior was unpredictable, and his level of aggression continued to escalate. No one knew what lay beneath his calm exterior, but within him, a predator was already taking shape, poised to deliver the first fatal blow. On November 13, 2011, in Bakersfield, California, a typical autumn evening unfolded. However, at the El Morocco Motel, that day culminated in a horrifying discovery that shocked both the city's residents and the police. In one of the rooms, the body of 36-year-old Yvette Pena, a mother of 6, was found. The corpse was in a horrific state, numerous wounds, blunt force trauma, and signs of strangulation. The police officers who arrived at the crime scene immediately realized they were dealing with a killer for whom violence was not merely a tool but an end in itself. Yvette Pena was known to many in the area. A woman battling addiction, she occasionally spent nights in inexpensive motels. The last time she was seen alive was the evening before, when she entered her room. Signs of a struggle and items strewn chaotically around the room indicated that Pena had attempted to defend herself, but the assailant proved stronger. The police promptly began interviewing witnesses, striving to piece together the sequence of events. Within a few days, the investigation focused on one individual, 23-year-old Jaime Osuna. He was apprehended near the crime scene and exhibited suspicious behavior. Witnesses claimed to have seen him with Yvette just hours before her death. The questions posed by the police elicited only smirks from Osuna. He did not confess to the murder, but his words left little doubt about his involvement. "I was the last one with her. The rest is irrelevant." When detectives searched Osuna's residence, they uncovered a plethora of alarming evidence. Among the items were knives, blood-stained clothing, and journals in which he detailed his fascination with violence. These writings became crucial evidence not only of his involvement in Yvette's murder but also of his propensity for committing similar crimes in the future. Despite the growing body of evidence, the case of Osuna progressed slowly. His attorney contended that the defendant could not be the murderer due to the absence of direct proof. However, experts who examined his records and behavior concluded that Jaime Osuna was a dangerous individual, capable of cold-blooded actions. 6 years later, in 2017, Osuna pleaded guilty. During the trial, he continued to exhibit a blatant disregard for those around him. As the family of Yvette Pena recounted their suffering, Osuna openly laughed. He stated that he felt no remorse for the events that transpired, adding, "I relish seeing people in fear. Fear makes me stronger." Consequently, Osuna was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Yet this punishment did not deter him, rather, it marked a new chapter in his life, one where he could unleash his destructive nature. The trial of Jaime Osuna commenced in 2017, 6 years after the murder of Yvette Pena. This delay was attributed to the complexities of the investigation, numerous appeals, and requests from the defense. Nevertheless, the very persona of the accused became the focal point for both the court and the public. He was a man who did not conceal his involvement in the crime and reveled in the attention directed towards him. At first glance, the courtroom appeared to be an ordinary venue for the administration of justice. However, Osuna's presence transformed each session into a terrifying spectacle. His face was adorned with tattoos, including symbolic skulls and demonic imagery. Yet the most chilling aspect was the lines carved into his face, creating the illusion of a mask. This visage became his calling card and a means to instill fear in others. From the outset of the proceedings, Osuna behaved provocatively. He gazed at witnesses and the judge with a smirk, interrupted attorneys, and made inappropriate remarks. A particularly painful moment arose during the testimony of Yvette Pena's family. Her mother, barely holding back tears, recounted how the loss of her daughters shattered their lives. Instead of expressing sympathy, Osuna laughed ostentatiously, inciting a wave of outrage in the courtroom. At one hearing, he declared, "I am not a monster, I am an artist. What I do is art. It is a way to express myself." These words were utilized by the prosecution as evidence that Osuna not only recognized his actions but also derived pleasure from them. Forensic evaluations indicated that he was mentally sound and aware of the consequences of his actions. This precluded the possibility of a defense based on insanity, marking a significant turning point in the trial. The prosecution presented compelling evidence of his guilt, including surveillance footage showing Osuna with Yvette Pena, as well as forensic results confirming the presence of her blood on his clothing. However, the most potent argument came from his own words. In diaries seized during a search, he detailed how he relished inflicting pain and likened himself to mythical beings that feed on fear. The trial culminated in a verdict of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. During the reading of the sentence, the judge addressed Osuna, stating, "You are the embodiment of evil. Your life in prison will serve as a reminder that justice exists." Despite the harsh sentence, Osuna appeared satisfied. He even thanked the court for acknowledging his persona, asserting that finally, "They see me for who I truly am." This trial became not only a punishment for Osuna but also a harbinger of future events. His behavior, display of violence, and contempt for societal norms fostered an atmosphere of fear that would later reflect on his life in prison. Following the sentencing, Jaime Osuna was transferred to one of California's most secure prisons, the California State Prison, Corcoran, located in Kings County. This facility was renowned for its stringent security measures and harsh conditions, designed for inmates deemed extremely dangerous. Yet even in such an environment, Osuna managed to stand out and become a legend among fellow inmates. From the first days of his incarceration, he captured the attention of those around him with his behavior. Despite his life sentence, Osuna exhibited neither remorse nor fear of his fate. He continued to showcase his affinity for violence and shock those around him. His tattoos grew increasingly grim and menacing, transforming his face into a sinister mask. Among inmates and guards, he earned the moniker "the man with 1,000 faces" not only for his appearance but also for his ability to manipulate those around him, adopting different personas depending on the situation. Within the prison, Osuna carved out his place in the hierarchy, swiftly earning a reputation as a dangerous and unpredictable individual. He evoked a mixture of fear and respect among other inmates, often openly mocking their weaknesses. Prison psychologists attempted to engage with him, but their efforts proved futile. Osuna evaded serious discussions, preferring to respond with sarcasm or silence. One of his most talked about habits was collecting newspaper articles and photographs related to murders and serial killers. In his cell, he created a macabre gallery of horrors, to which he added his own drawings. In some of these, he depicted himself as a harbinger of fate, surrounded by symbols of death. The prison guards could not overlook his influence. Osuna understood how to manipulate them, evoking either fear or curiosity. Some staff members admitted to feeling uneasy in his presence, even through the protective glass. He was willing to sit for hours opposite a guard, studying him intently and smiling silently, which made them anxious. However, his true nature revealed itself in his interactions with other inmates. In 2017, shortly after arriving at Corcoran, he became notorious for his involvement in a conflict with a group of prisoners who attempted to subjugate him. The assault, during which Osuna not only fought back but also inflicted serious injuries on one of his adversaries, served as further evidence of his brutality. Following this incident, he was regarded with even greater caution. His time in prison also solidified his hatred for society and intensified his inclination towards violence. In one interview, he stated, "Prison is not a punishment for me. It is my home. Here, I can be myself." This mindset elucidated his behavior. For Osuna, incarceration became not a punishment but a platform for the continued exhibition of his dark nature. He rejected rehabilitative programs and psychiatric assistance, asserting that his mind was in order. A new phase of his criminal career commenced in prison, culminating in one of the most heinous acts of violence committed behind bars. He was assigned a cellmate, but the administration's decision proved fateful. This individual, Luis Romero, soon became yet another victim of Osuna. In 2019, the Corcoran Prison Administration decided to assign Jaime Osuna a cellmate. This individual was Luis Romero, a 44-year-old inmate serving a lengthy sentence for a murder committed in his adolescence. He had spent the majority of his life behind bars, striving to avoid conflicts. However, sharing a cell with Osuna turned out to be a catastrophic mistake for Romero. This grave error stemmed from a blatant oversight. The prison administration failed to consider Osuna's reputation as a dangerous and aggressive inmate. Correctional staff later admitted that they saw no grounds for isolating Jaime, despite his repeated displays of aggression. The decision to pair him with another inmate was made based on overcrowding and the need to optimize space. On March 9, 2019, guards discovered a horrifying scene. Luis Romero's body lay on the bed in the cell, but what Osuna had done to him horrified even the most seasoned prison staff. Romero had been decapitated, and his face was brutally disfigured. One of his eyes had been removed, along with a portion of his lung. The victim's hands were bound with makeshift ropes, and his head was adorned with a grotesque improvisation resembling a crown. Knives crafted by Osuna from razors and metal objects he had secretly collected over the months leading up to the crime played a pivotal role in this atrocity. These homemade instruments of murder enabled him to commit an act of unimaginable brutality without attracting the guards' attention. The guards patrolling the block noticed nothing unusual on the night of the murder. The cell housing Osuna and Romero remained locked until morning. When staff finally entered, they initially failed to grasp the extent of the tragedy. Only later, when investigators and experts were summoned, did the horrifying details emerge. In response to the investigation's inquiries, Jaime Osuna maintained his habitual smirk. He confessed to the murder, but his words left no doubt that he felt no remorse. "It was an act of art. I made it special. You understand that people will remember this." The investigation confirmed that Osuna acted with incredible precision and calculation. Psychologists analyzing his behavior noted that he found in violence not merely satisfaction but a form of self-expression. His speech was replete with bizarre metaphors, and his descriptions of the murder sounded as though he took pride in his actions. This case sparked immense public outcry. The media characterized Osuna as one of the most brutal criminals in California's history. The prison administration faced severe criticism for allowing a murder to occur in a maximum security setting. Luis Romero's family filed a lawsuit against the prison, accusing its leadership of negligence. In their statement, the family asserted, "They knew who they were dealing with. Osuna should have been isolated, but instead, they allowed him to kill our brother." This incident prompted an internal investigation that uncovered numerous violations in the system of security and inmate control. The prison administration publicly acknowledged its error, but this did not restore Luis Romero's life. Meanwhile, for Osuna, this murder marked yet another step in his grim career. He solidified his image as a person capable of unimaginable cruelty and continued to leverage his notoriety to intimidate those around him. His confession to the murder did not result in additional sentences, as he was already serving a life term. However, his actions initiated a new legal process concerning the potential imposition of the death penalty. Following the shocking murder of Luis Romero in 2019, public and judicial attention once again turned to Jaime Osuna. The question of his mental health became central in subsequent proceedings. The crime, committed within a maximum security prison, raised numerous concerns about how an individual exhibiting clear signs of aggression and a propensity for violence could remain in a general population cell. Immediately after the incident, Osuna was transferred to an isolated unit, where he was under constant surveillance. Prison psychologists and experts commenced an intensive examination of his personality to ascertain whether he comprehended the ramifications of his actions and was fit to stand trial for Romero's murder. The initial findings were ambiguous. On one hand, he displayed a high level of intelligence and a complete understanding of his actions. On the other, his statements and behavior indicated severe psychological disturbances. During one of his discussions with psychologists, Osuna declared, "I am not merely a man. I am something greater. Violence is my nature, and you cannot change it." The evaluation revealed that Osuna suffered from narcissistic personality disorder, as well as potential antisocial disorder. However, experts were divided on whether this was a sufficient basis to declare him insane. The defense argued that his childhood trauma, abuse, and evident mental disorders rendered him incapable of recognizing his actions. Conversely, the prosecution contended that Osuna had meticulously planned Romero's murder and acted with full awareness of the consequences. In January 2021, the court ruled to temporarily suspend the proceedings in Romero's case to allow for further psychiatric evaluation. The defendant's advocates asserted that their client should not be held accountable for his actions, as he lives in his own world. This elicited mixed reactions from both the public and the victim's family, who believed that Osuna was merely manipulating the system. In February of the same year, experts presented a new report declaring Osuna competent to participate in the trial. The conclusion was based on the assertion that he understood he had committed murder and was aware of its consequences. This decision revived the case, and prosecutors once again sought the death penalty for him. Alongside the judicial proceedings concerning Romero's case, new charges loomed over Osuna. Several prison staff members reported that he had assaulted them during his confinement in isolation. In one instance, he wielded a sharp object to threaten a guard, demanding more time for outdoor exercise. This incident only intensified calls for Osuna's isolation, as he became increasingly dangerous even under strict supervision. In June 2022, following another round of court hearings, Osuna's defense once again attempted to demonstrate that his mental state precluded the imposition of the death penalty. The attorney stated, "This man is a product of a system that broke him in childhood. He was not born a monster, he was made into one." However, prosecutors countered that, despite a difficult upbringing, Osuna had chosen the path of violence and exhibited no remorse whatsoever. They pointed to his journals, drawings, and statements made during interrogations as evidence that he reveled in his reputation as a killer. In December 2023, the court declined to impose the death penalty on Jaime Osuna, upholding a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The decision was met with mixed reactions. For Romero's family, it was yet another blow, as they had hoped for the maximum punishment. However, human rights advocates noted that Osuna would remain in strict isolation, preventing any potential harm to others. Despite the ruling, Jaime Osuna's case is far from concluded. His name continues to evoke fear and revulsion, and the numerous violations within the correctional system uncovered during the investigation have become the subject of significant reforms. The case of Jaime Osuna garnered widespread attention not only due to his crimes but also because of the myriad questions it raised for society and the justice system. The public was divided. Some viewed Osuna as the embodiment of evil deserving of the harshest penalties, while others believed that his behavior was a consequence of the system's failure to protect him in childhood and rehabilitate him in adulthood. As the media began to extensively cover his story, Jaime Osuna became a true sensation. His appearance, a tattooed face and a chilling smile, instantly made him a subject of interest not only for journalists but also for the general public. Internet forums and social media were flooded with discussions about his persona, while documentaries and podcasts dedicated to his crimes amassed millions of views. Osuna's image became a symbol of the extreme manifestations of human cruelty. However, in this narrative, the focus was not solely on him, but also on the vulnerabilities of the system. The first target of criticism was the prison administration, which allowed the murder of Luis Romero to occur under strict supervision. The subsequent investigation revealed a series of violations. Among the primary issues were: 1. Staff shortages. Many guards simultaneously monitored multiple blocks, resulting in a diminished level of oversight over the inmates. On the night of Romero's murder, the surveillance of the cells was minimal. 2. Misassessment of threats. Despite numerous warnings regarding Osuna's aggressive behavior, he was left in general population cells and not transferred to permanent isolation. 3. Overcrowding in prisons. Corcoran, like many other prisons in California, faced a severe shortage of space, forcing the administration to house incompatible inmates together. These issues prompted a lawsuit filed by Luis Romero's family against the California Department of Corrections. The family sought financial compensation and reforms to prevent the recurrence of such tragedies. During the hearings for this case, the Romero family's attorney emphasized, "If the prison system cannot protect individuals even behind bars, how can it guarantee safety beyond them?" This question became a catalyst for extensive discussions within society. Numerous experts began to investigate why acts of violence occur so frequently in American prisons. One conclusion drawn was that many institutions are underfunded, and rehabilitation programs for inmates are either non-existent or ineffective. Amidst the public, another wave of criticism emerged directed at the justice system as a whole. Many questioned how a person like Osuna could not only survive within the system but continue to pose a threat to others. Some argued that the death penalty could have prevented his further crimes, while others pointed to the necessity of enhanced psychiatric care for dangerous inmates. Human rights organizations, in turn, utilized Osuna's case as an argument against the excessive brutality of the American prison system. They contended that solitary confinement and harsh conditions not only failed to rehabilitate individuals but also fostered the development of their darkest traits. One representative of the organization stated, "Monsters are not born, they are made. We allow the system to transform traumatized individuals into killing machines." Osuna's story also sparked immense interest among criminal psychology researchers. Professors and practicing psychologists began to delve deeply into his behavior, attempting to understand what precisely shaped him. Many concluded that a combination of factors underpinned his actions: a troubled childhood, mental illness, an early propensity for violence, and the system's failure to intervene in a timely manner. Meanwhile, Jaime Osuna continued to be a figure evoking fear and revulsion. He received numerous interview requests from journalists but chose only those whom he claimed understood his artistry. These rare interviews confirmed that Osuna had no intention of altering his views or behavior. In one such conversation, he stated, "I do not regret what I have done. I see it as part of my life. My life is chaos, and I embrace it." By 2024, the discussion surrounding Osuna's case led to several significant reforms. The California prison system increased its budget for psychiatric care for inmates and improved isolation conditions for the most dangerous among them. However, these measures could not erase the memory of the horrific crimes that became emblematic of systemic failures. The case of Jaime Osuna left a profound mark on society, not only due to the monstrous cruelty of his crimes but also because of the questions it raised about the nature of evil, the role of the justice system, and the importance of psychiatric assistance. It became a litmus test, revealing weaknesses not only in the penal system but also in the mechanisms for preventing violence. The persona of Jaime Osuna, his behavior, and his statements provoke contemplation about what shapes such individuals. Is evil an inherent quality, or is it a product of the environment in which a person grows? In Osuna's case, it is evident that his childhood, rife with violence and cruelty, played a pivotal role. However, one must also consider the personal choices he made in adulthood. Psychologists and criminologists note that Osuna exhibited traits of narcissism, psychopathy, and antisocial personality disorder. Yet, his admiration for violence and complete lack of remorse indicate a conscious acceptance of his role as a destroyer. He referred to himself as a death artist, suggesting that he viewed his actions not merely as crimes but as something that elevated him above others. Osuna stands as a stark example of how the system can fail to rehabilitate and isolate dangerous individuals. His journey from a mere street thug to a serial killer was marked by numerous moments when intervention could have altered the course of events. Yet, as is often the case, the system's response was belated. Only after his prison crimes did discussions about the necessity for change begin. The primary lesson from this case is the understanding of the importance of risk assessment. Jaime Osuna was a clear threat even under strict supervision, and yet he managed to commit murder within one of California's most secure prisons. This demonstrated that the system requires additional mechanisms to address individuals who pose a danger not only to society but also to other inmates. Despite all his brutality, Osuna's persona continues to captivate attention. His image has become part of popular culture, both frightening and mesmerizing. For some, he embodies the dark side of human nature. For others, he serves as a warning of what can occur if societal issues are ignored. The media, despite accusations of sensationalism, played a crucial role in highlighting this case. They raised questions that are rarely discussed openly: how to deal with individuals who are resistant to rehabilitation, how to protect society from those who view violence as a means of self-expression. These questions remain relevant to this day. As of 2024, Jaime Osuna remains in strict isolation, his life confined to a prison cell. He can no longer directly threaten others, but his story continues to influence public consciousness. It serves as a reminder that evil can take many forms, and combating it requires not only punishment but also a profound understanding of its roots. The California justice system has drawn lessons from this case. Enhanced monitoring of dangerous inmates, improved working conditions for prison staff, and expanded psychiatric care programs have all been direct consequences of the events surrounding Osuna. However, the effectiveness of these measures remains to be seen over time. The case of Jaime Osuna is more than just a story about a serial killer. It is a warning that violence, if ignored, can grow like a disease, affecting not only the perpetrator but also the entire system that was meant to stop him. It is a grim yet vital lesson for a society facing the challenges of combating cruelty and indifference.